Go ahead and jump to your module directory and open up the third step, which is called validation. Go ahead and select and copy all the code and paste it over the code that's currently in your input.module file and save it. In this example, we're demonstrating how to add server-side validation to our form. So when the form gets submitted, we need to make sure that the user has added any content that they need to inputs. Of course, we can use the required attribute for very simple validation, but we may want to check for a string length or particular values. Out of the box, Drupal gives us some nice validation by default, including when we use checkboxes, radios, or select inputs. Anytime somebody enters a value that's not one of those selectable values, it will throw an error. So we don't have to manually check for those, which is really nice. For this validation, what we're going to do is check to see whether the user has input the word blue for their favorite color and tell them that they're actually wrong and that yellow is their favorite color. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the only code that we've added to this file is this validation function here. Now Drupal knows to call a validation function on a form submit in two different ways. The first is that you can define a function that's the name of the form render array function, so input simple form, plus an underscore validate at the end. So this function will be searched for automatically. We don't need to register it anywhere. The second method is to add a function name to the form validate array that's passed as the form render array, and I'll show an example of that later on. In this function, we're doing something really simple. We're checking the form state values array, and the values array contains an array of all of the inputted items that have been passed by the user through the form, and we're checking it for a value of blue. And if the value is blue, then we're going to use a function called formSetError. And anytime we use this, it takes two parameters. The first is the name of the input where the error is happening, and the second is the error message to display. So what this function will do is, number one, it'll add some styling to the input that's causing the problem. So in our theme, it's going to be a red line around the box. And then it will show an error message at the top of the page that says whatever you pass it. What I want to do is stop the processing of the script right here and take a look at the form and form state arrays so you can kind of see what's going on behind the scenes. I'm going to use my debugger for that. And if you're curious about how I'm using this debugger, there are a couple of videos in this series that describe it in more detail. But basically what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint, and that will stop the execution here, and we can take a look at both the form and the form state arrays. Then I'm going to jump to the browser, and I'm going to begin a debugging session by clicking on this little icon here, which is part of the Easy Xdebug add-on. And we need to input blue here in order to trigger our validation error. I'm going to click Submit. And we just saw my editor icon bouncing on the dock. And here we are, we're stopped at this line right here. So now we can take a look at both the form and the form state arrays. Let's go ahead and expand form. You see here we have our color and submit inputs, and these are all the details that we added, plus a whole lot more. So during the Drupal get form processing, a whole lot of information is added that we don't have to add explicitly. For example, the size, which corresponds to how wide the input's going to be, and the max length, which is how much text it will accept. We look at our submit function, we see similarly a lot of information has been added in addition to what we added to it. And then we have a whole lot of other information that we don't need to necessarily know just yet, but if you want to explore, this is how you would do it. Let's take a look at the form state array. This also contains a good bit of information, but if we scroll down, we'll see a values array, and this contains all of the information that was submitted with the form. And this is typically what we would perform validation on, and also grab for the submission process. So we see the color is blue, and there's some additional data here, including the form token, which is a unique identifier for our form, which prevents cross-site request forgeries or one site submitting a form on behalf of our site. So if we jump back to our code, we'll see this if statement. We're checking for form state values color, and that corresponds to this values color here.